Okay, episode 8, The Self. With great power comes great responsibility. Madiha, creator.
Usman Jamil, lawyer, sports enthusiast, playlist maker, and traveler.
Thank you, Usman, for being here. Who said this? With great power comes great responsibility. A wise shaman or Spider-Man?
I'd like to think it was a wise shaman,
But
popular
probably,
belief is
probably Spider-Man.
actually, wasn't it Uncle Ben in Spider-Man?
मुझे स्पाइडरमैन का सिर्फ फ्रैंचाइज पता है, मुझे नहीं पता उसके बीच में कौन कौन लोग हैं, बस मुझे पता था जनरली. So when I think of the self, I think of the self as what I once read. We are not humans who have a soul. We are a soul having a human experience. And that kind of helped me shift my perspective, especially when it came to dealing with a lot of uncomfortable emotions and uncomfortable incidences in our lives. So I'll talk about the power part of it first, and then we'll go to the responsibility part. So what it helped me to do was detach, separate myself from the pain, the anger, bitterness, resentment, any form of trauma that my body was experiencing and had been experiencing. And I began to look at myself almost from a separate standpoint, like a point of view. And so how it felt like I did not have to be a person who was in pain. I did not have to be the person who was going through trauma. And I could look at myself from a distance and understand that these are human constructs. This is my body experiencing the worldly part of it, experiencing all of these emotions. But there's a bigger part of me, which is looking at all of these emotions and instances. And that part is not in judgment, is not asking me to do something that I wasn't ready to do, is not pushing me on to do it better. It just did not have a perspective, any perspective other than that of love and compassion. So how it helped me was I could look at the hurting part of Madiha, who had gone through a divorce after 10 years of her marriage. And what the soul part of me could say to the hurting part of Madiha was, it is a moment. You are going through this pain. It is not all of you. There are other parts of you as well. So it did not invalidate the part of me that was hurting, but it did not ask me to be anything other than that part in that moment either. And so it allowed me to be in that hurting part for a while until I felt safe enough to release it and to let it go. And I loved the fact that there was somebody, and it was myself, the soul part, but there was somebody for the first time who was patient enough with me to allow me to process and go through in the way that I had chosen. Whatever I needed to do, she was patient enough for me to be able to do that. And I had not received that before. And the other part of it that I realized was that whenever we are going through a moment in our life where we feel the most alone and we feel very, very lonely, we're always expecting others to come step in and understand, but we also know that they will never be able to understand what we're going through. So if we can identify a part of ourselves who can give us that compassion that we need in that moment, and that part is ourselves, because that self understands exactly. And if you can do that in a way where you don't have, like, that part can understand, but doesn't have to be that part either. So it's the outsider, but from within you. It's from within you outsider. And when the within you outsider gives you that support, the blossoming that happens, and I imagine that as a blossoming, is quite incredible. And funnily enough, with the power of the self, now this part of it is now linked to the other part, which is responsibility. That means that if there's an outside self of you within yourself who can look at yourself with the same compassion that you need in that moment, that means that there's also like the responsibility part is that whatever moment is happening in your life is not happening to you. It's almost as if you are this self-contained an entire cosmos, right? An entire cosmos. And so the self that I'm referring to now is the cosmos. And in that cosmos, there's a human part of you who has now designed a multitude of events for itself to be able to learn lessons. And if that human part of you has designed disease, has designed divorce, has designed separation in any form, has designed mental illness, has designed other really traumatic events for itself to be able to learn those lessons, then there's nobody else to blame.
Yes.
There's no, you cannot, there is no, because you're a self-contained cosmos, there is nothing that can affect your cosmosness and your energy within it. And that means there are 8 billion self-contained cosmoses which exist simultaneously, and none of them have the power to affect or create events. You are a self-sustaining, self-creating power. It's a self-created, what's it called? An organism which is alive and breathing, and there's nobody else who can come and create or do anything to you. So that is, again, it depends on how you look at it, but that is both terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because all the stories that we've told ourselves, this happened to me, that person did that to me, and then this happened, and then that person did that to me. None of those constructs stand anymore. All of those fall apart. It's liberating because if you have chosen to create those moments and instances in your life to be able to learn some lessons for yourself, that means you have the power to create other moments and instances in your life. If you've learned those lessons, to learn lessons in a different way. You don't have to learn them through pain. So there was a sense of liberation that came with being set free of not having blamed anybody, having nobody else to blame. And with that, then comes the next step, which is the hardest, which I'm still learning, that of forgiveness. Forgiveness not to others, but to ourselves. Because why on earth would we choose to create such painful moments for ourselves to learn which lessons? And why did we not have the sense enough to be able to create alternative moments to be able to learn the same lessons? So the first thing is being able to extend that forgiveness to ourselves in the journey that we have led and in the moments that we've chosen. But this is more, it's a radical concept. It's a radical concept in a way where there's nothing outside yourself anyway, at all. So whatever comfort you're looking for, whatever safety you're looking for, whatever validation you're looking for, acceptance or a love that you're looking for is not through not one other human being, not from your parents, not from your kids. It does not exist. It does not exist. The only thing that there is whatever you create, because it's a self-sustaining organism and it's the great creator. So whatever you're creating inside will automatically be reflected outside. And so there's no one to blame. And even if you've had the most traumatic childhood, there is nobody else to blame. And I don't know whether you call it blame or not, but there's nobody else to blame but yourself. And I would not call it blame, again, because whatever you do out of ignorance of who you are is something that you cannot blame, because it was purely, you did not know better. You did what you could do best in that moment. But to take away the blame from anybody else and just take full responsibility of it on your own, that is a conversation I'd like to have. But first, I'd like to understand and ask you what your concept of self is and what your concept of this entire with great power comes great responsibility. What is your point of view?
Well, I think for me, it's really about what I've learned, at least on my journey, is building yourself up versus tearing yourself down. I, throughout my life, have been a selfless person. I've always put the needs of the others before myself. And as a result, I've not paid attention to myself. I've had to go through a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of tragedy to have been able to find or at least discover who myself is. We spoke about Spider-Man in the beginning. So I'm sure, I don't know if you're aware, but the first Spider-Man that came out, there was the enemy was the Green Goblin. And in the movie, Osborn Joe, the guy who plays, who's his real life character, and then there's Green. He's having conversations with him, and the Green Goblin is sort of taking control of his mind and whatnot, and telling him, "You have to do this. You have to kill Spider-Man." He's like, "No, I've been." So, for me, the discovery of the self really has been about having conversations with myself.
So you're saying that the Green Goblin was Spider-Man.
Yeah. So, for me personally, I am now able to see someone in the mirror who isn't me, but is there and is actively telling me that there's a lot more to you than what you think. In fact, it's something I've been discussing a lot in therapy as well, that I can actually now have conversations every day in the morning with myself.
And what do you tell yourself?
What I tell myself is, it's, and they're very sort of, organic sort of things, organic conversations. I think what I do, the first thing is that when I talk to myself, it's, you're here. You're here. You could have been somewhere. I mean, as terrible as it sounds, you could have been buried under, a pile of sheets, and it was very difficult for you to get up. But you're here. And I think one of the biggest examples of my talking to myself is that I do these exercises where the other person who's looking at me in the mirror says, write down all the things you don't like about yourself. And I actually do it. And then he says, write down all the things you love about yourself. So what happens is, when I started, there were around 50 things I could write that I didn't like about myself. And there were maybe 4 or 5 things I could write about what I love about myself. But as I've been doing it, it's now sort of equalizing, because I'm actually doing it. And for the first time in my life, it's so powerful because I've never done it. And I actually recognize that, hey, there's a lot more to you than just being this martyr who loves pain. Having that confidence to actually go through this process almost on a daily basis. I mean, it's done wonders for me in terms of discovering who myself is. That self I knew existed, but I never paid attention to it. And I let all the stress in my life overtake me. I suffer from psoriasis. It's a skin condition caused by high levels of stress. I also am going through, a painful divorce. But at the same time, ever since I've discovered myself, it's allowed me to be free. I can actually sit there and talk about everything that has happened to me, and I think I'm stronger for it. I don't think I'm weaker for it. I think it's helped me evolve into the person that I am today, and I look forward to the future, because for the first time in my life, I can actually talk about things that bring me up. make me feel better about myself, because I actively do those things, that exercise, where I can talk about and where I can feel, okay, these are the things that I love about myself. So yeah, so I mean, for me, the power of the self is very has been very uplifting, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
I love this visualization, because the way that I visualize, or the way that I have my conversation in the morning, and I do have that conversation. And one intent that I set for myself a long time ago is, until that conversation results in me feeling good about getting out of bed, I am not going to get out of bed. And in my daughter's school time, she goes to a special needs school, is 9 o'clock. Because of that conversation, she has reached school at 10 o'clock. Also, I have reached office at 10:30 in the morning. But for me, having that conversation and bringing myself to a point where I'm ready to get out of bed is the most important thing. So the three things that I do in the morning. The first thing is that I set an intent and I say it out loud, even before I'm fully conscious, is I promise myself that I will prioritize myself today. I will prioritize my needs, my wants, my desires. They will take the lead today. That's one. The second thing that I do, and it's a tool that I've discovered and it's really helped me, is every time that I am talking to myself as the self. So let me separate. So every time I'm talking to me as the self, I imagine myself as a 7-year-old kid. And now what I'm looking at as the self, what I'm looking at is a kid who is brave enough, who is so beautiful and so powerful in choosing to get out of bed that morning. And I'm just mostly congratulating her on being this brave, beautiful, amazing kid. So that's one part of it. The other conversation that I have with her is, hey, listen, I know that you are so, so, so wise, because you have not yet learned the ways of the world. You have not yet learned, my 6-7-year-old self, you have not yet learned how to protect yourself under layers. You have not yet learned how to deceive with words. Your heart is pure right now. You are trusting your heart more than, I don't remember me trusting my heart. I don't remember it, but you know how to do it. So hey, today, with your beautiful, powerful heart, that's not learned a lot of worldly ways of deceit and of illusion, why don't you lead the way for me today? And then I say, today, I allow you, and I give permission to my 7-year-old self, my inner child. I said, today, I allow you to lead me in every conversation, every encounter, every feeling that I have today. So before I respond to whatever's happening today, I would like to respond from a place of love, from a place of the heart, which inevitably is love or compassion or kindness. So I'd like to respond. And that's what I allow her to lead me in that day. And that's only, this particular exercise is only about 6 days old. Okay. It's not super, because I've just started having conversation with my inner child just about, a couple of weeks ago. So one is that. And then the third thing that I do is then I take the me out of it. Then it's not the inner child, and now it's not about, then I imagine myself as how do I call it? A cluster of light specks. And everything that I want, desire, love, my entire world is revolving around me as a circle of energy. And I say to myself, I am the observer of love. I am the observer of beauty. I'm the observer of peace and abundance. And I'm the observer of fullness. So when I do that, then my body loosens up on its own, because now it's not in its fight or flight mode. Now it's not ready to face the day or fight it out. Now it's saying, wait a minute, I already am observing all that I want. And none of them have form right now. None of them are coming into being as actual manifested physical form. They are great, powerful probabilities which are revolving around, but they're all mine. There's no outside interference. There is no outside force that's come and creating it for me. There's no outside force to pray to for this. I am the originator, the fulcrum, the creator, and at the center, the nucleus for this entire energy, for the entire energy to be dancing around me at all times. And so the other thing that helps me to do is I have been an impatient human being. I want things now. Although I'm not from the generation of instant gratification. But I do want things. I did want things now. And I liked what you said, I'm here now, because how I take it and translate it for myself is I may not be seeing the physical results of my needs, wants, desires right now. But I can feel the pulsating of them right now, and there is no hurry. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to be. I can sit here and observe, and that is enough. So then the race that we have opted in, and we have a choice to opt out of as well. The race of being in a beautiful relationship now, of being in a high-powered job now, of getting whatever material things, being the best version of yourself now, of being amazing parent now, of being amazing sibling, blah, blah, blah. Like whatever standards that we've kept for ourselves, which we have to race towards and strive towards. I don't like this word. Strive towards. They all fall flat.
Yes, absolutely.
There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to be. There's nobody to race. Dude, पूरा cosmos आप ही हो.
Yes.
किसके साथ आपने race? Where's the competition?
Absolutely.
So there's a sense of fulfillment that comes as a self which observes.
Yes.
And and it links back to what first interested me about this entire path, which is now called healing, but it started off with quantum physics, which is a particle, when observed, changes form into a wave, and that wave is the only probability there is. That's the principle of quantum physics. Nothing exists until it is observed. And the moment you observe it, it changes form. It comes to become, it becomes to be, or comes to become, whatever. And that phenomenon of how, as the observer, you create, and you do nothing but create, is something that makes me feel very, very liberated. I feel like that's the true kind of freedom that I've been looking for half my life. What does freedom feel like? I know now in this moment. Again, it's just a 4-day-old feeling, but it's a feeling that's very strongly here. And so what is my question to you is, what is that one, because we've all built some prisons of our mind for ourselves. What is, and for our perceived selves. So what is the one prison that you now see that you had built for yourself your whole life? What was that prison like for you? And what does it feel like to step out of it into free air? So when I say this, I don't even know if it makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
So what has been your prison?
My prison has been my childhood. In the sense that in my childhood, I was always told, I was told positive things growing up, but I was always told that you're not good enough at this, you're too fat, you're not working hard enough, you're not special. And I think all of these things, it took its toll, because that conditioning sort of made me feel that, all right, I'm just a very insignificant part of the cosmos and wherever I exist. And I think it just made me feel that, all right, as long as I get by, as long as I grow up with with decent values or be a good human being, I'm good. I'll be able to survive, and it's all right. But with the new discovery of myself, I mean, I can give you practical examples of how it's helped me tremendously. So I mentioned that I'm a lawyer, a sports enthusiast, a playlist creator, traveler. So I'd like to give you practical examples of all of them, small examples. So lawyer. So as a lawyer, we are trained to come up with solutions to problems. We have to think on our feet. Before I discovered myself, it was a chore. It was something I always thought it was a job. It was something that I do to earn a living. And as idealistic as it sounds, given the current state of our profession, unfortunately, in the country, now every day in the morning when I get up and have to go to court, I go to court with a different purpose, a different sense. The sense is that as long as I do and I'm true to what in of my profession, I'm true to what it is that I'm trying to do, I'm happy. As long as I'm happy that I have put in the work and I'm ready, the result is good or bad, it doesn't matter. As long as I'm happy that I've done my best. Sports, enthusiast. I play sports as well. I play golf, I play tennis. Now, I thought that doing that was just to lose weight. But now I do it to feel good. Now I do it because myself, my inner self, it says to me that this is a certain part of time in a day that is yours. And that's a time where you're free. That's a time where no one can bother you. If you allow someone to bother you, that's another thing. So, like for example, when I've recently started I've taken up running. So I've been running now for the last 3-4 months, and I'll also come to music now because when I run, I listen to music.
I know you as a music guy.
So I have a playlist. It's called Run. All right, and when I'm running, you begin slowly and then you then speed up. So when I'm running, I know exactly what songs I'm going to be playing depending on where I am at in the run. So for me, it's the absolute joy that it gives me doing that. No one can give me, and that's me. That's me. And before that, I never gave myself that opportunity to actually enjoy something. And the last one, playlist creation. I can now listen to a playlist called Pain, for example, which has a lot of sad music, a lot of bad memories. But now I can listen to it and smile. Because I know with every song there's a painful memory, but there's also really great memories. And the conversations that I've had with myself allow me, when I'm listening to those to those songs, connecting with those lyrics, the old me would have connected with the really sad part of those lyrics. And I just start howling, and I just get into bed and I just put the sheet over my head and just sob. But now I can listen to it and I can still sob and still cry. But at the same time, it makes me happy to listen to that music because I'm free. So, for me, definitely, the prison for me was definitely my childhood growing up. And now at age almost 43, I'm now discovering what freedom is.
And it's funny because just before this podcast, I asked you this question. I said, when was the last time you started to feel safe in your own body?
Yes.
And you said just 2 months.
3-4 months ago.
3-4 months ago.
Yes.
And I said, well, Usman, for me, and I'm going to turn 43 as well. So Usman, for me, just 2 months ago. It's taken us a lifetime. And what it does, but one thing that I am incredibly proud of when it comes to myself is that within this journey, my teenage son has been a part of it, not in any direct way because he shifted abroad before the big transformation happened for me a year ago. But how important it is for me, the prison has been that of an imposter. I've always pretended to be who I'm not, who I was expected to be, and I've shown up that. And for me, I feel the biggest lesson that I've learned in honoring the self, the true self, is authenticity and showing up as who you are, and not just in selected moments or in selected spaces, in all moments and in all spaces. And the reason I talk about my son is just yesterday, this morning, in fact, I woke up to a message from him. He's saying, Mama, so I come from a conservative family and a religiously inclined family as well. And he's living abroad and I have relatives there. He's just gotten a big forearm tattoo. Okay. And he had to go visit the house, and he said it was very hot, and I was wearing a jacket indoors, and everybody kept making fun of me, I think you may have a tattoo, which is true, but I don't know what to do. It just felt weird. It's a small moment, right? So here's what I said to him, and here's what I am incredibly proud of. I said, Asad, this moment is not a small moment. You are choosing to be in a place where you are having to show up as your non-self. It's not an authentic self. You're having to hide because of a sense of shame or guilt of being a Muslim who has a tattoo. Don't show up in that space again. And it's a very close space for me. I'm very close to them. So don't show up in that space. And when you are ready, show up in that space as you. But once you've processed the judgment that you may think is coming from them, which will be coming from them, doesn't have to come from them. Because once you have processed that judgment, you'd be surprised. Because I remember when I got my first tattoo, and I'm a woman, the eldest in the family. And I was hiding it's a small tattoo. I was hiding it from my father. My mother knew my father for a long time. And one day, and of course, none of these things happened in one day, over a course of few months, after I had, in recovery and discovery of myself, one day I decided to walk into the lawn with quarter sleeve shirts. And I shook my father's hand. And he said, "Ye kya hai?" And I said, "A tattoo." And he said, "Ye permanent wala hai ya sticker wala hai?" I was like, "Babaji, permanent wala hai." He said, "Okay." He said, "Okay." And there was no judgment from him. And in fact, after that, my younger brother, who was like an addict, a tattoo addict, he found, because the safe space was created by one person, he showed up as himself because he had gotten used to it. So what I did not want my son to go through is to go through a cycle of judgment, shame, and guilt, where you have to force yourself to show up as your authentic self. Because what it does to you, Usman, you think it's a small thing, but it's a collection of these small moments that add up. And even one small thing is a bruise, is a scar to your soul, because the self is so pure and so real and so in awe of its own self and so in love with its own self. When it sees its own human self being ashamed of who they are, it hurts the soul. And it is this pain that translates into isolation, depression, anxiety. And and bigger, it just goes on to disease, to physical disease as well. Stored pain of not being able to be yourself. So how authentic it is to be able to show up as yourself is a very essential part of your soul journey.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned your son. I can mention my children also. My daughter is 14, my son is 13. And having fully realized, I think, what trauma or what pain that we parents cause them, I think the discovery, at least personally for me, of myself, and as I'm going on this journey, I'm able to share it with my children. And it's so important because the way that we were brought up by our parents, they're good things, they're bad things, but it's for me at least personally, it's so important to take stock of the bad things and try not to repeat them with our own children.
Yes.
But giving our children the power and the ability to realize and to understand that yourself is so important. If you give yourself the freedom, the space, the love, the care, the attention, then you will be able to choose to be happy, and to be able to share those thoughts and those ideas with your children. For me is very liberating because I never had those. No one had those conversations with me growing up.
Yeah.
I had to discover them later on in life on my own or as being a parent. So it's amazing that we have these blessings around us that we can share with our children. Yes, we protect them. We want to do everything to sort of shield them from harm, but we also have to understand that the journey of the self, they will be harmed. There will be problems. There will be times where that shield will be penetrated. We have to help them understand that your shield, your self, when you make yourself aware of it, you understand that is what's going to get you through life.
I love that because I think it's so strongly linked to responsibility.
Yes.
When we as parents,
Yes.
which is the most integral role and the most influential role we'd ever play, because we have the power to mold and influence them, right? When we take responsibility for ourselves, we set our children free. So about 4 days ago, again, my son and I are having beautiful text WhatsApp conversations. So 4 days ago, he was, I was telling you, he was narrating an incident of how he got into an aggressive moment with a co-worker and in his side gig. So I let him talk through it, and he said, "Mama, what I've realized about myself is that I have this capacity to withhold my anger in moments where I should demonstrate it. But it comes out unnaturally, most aggressively in moments which don't warrant it." So I'm trying to understand what's happening. And I said, "Asad, what do you feel?" He said, "Mama, I feel like as a child," and this is an 18-year-old, he said, "I feel like as a child, I was pushed down so much that now," and because he was also an overweight child, right? So he said, "I felt so burdened by how I look like that now," because he's taken up MMA. "So now I'm putting myself in a physically fit space where I can defend myself and like nobody can ever put me down and nobody." And I said, "Asad, I'm going to take a moment," and now we shifted to a phone call. I said, "I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to explain something to you." He said, "What?" I said, what actually happened was from the age of 1 to 7, you were emotionally abandoned by your mother. You were emotionally and physically abused by your mother. And you were left to fend for yourself. You did not feel seen, you did not feel heard, and you did not feel safe." I said, "I experienced the same childhood. And I chose to take up the armor or the weaponry of words. And you have taken up the weaponry of physical fitness, of MMA. But I said, none of these weapons are sustainable. They're illusions. Because what's actually happening is that you're trying to feel safe and you're trying to be seen and be heard when your little child, or your 1 to 7-year-old child, is not feeling that.
Yes.
So whatever you're going to be doing in as an adult, to make yourself be seen will always be for other people. Your little child will never feel safe." And he said, "How do I make him feel safe?" I said, "Well, you have to go inward and you'll have to start speaking to him and you'll have to start reassuring him that first he is seen and he is heard and that he is more than the trauma that his mother passed on to him.
Right.
And you've got to at some point learn to forgive me."
Beautiful.
And he said, "But it doesn't matter. I forgave you." I said, "No, until you have this anger inside you, until you heal your inner child, And that day will come, because we're having this conversation now. You're 18. Do not have to spend a lifetime of making painful choices to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. You can heal yourself now, and you can make different choices from your mother. But know that your mother made you feel this way, and know that your inner child felt this way. And I believe that with this conversation, Usman, I have actually set him free in a very big way. He never has to, because as kids, we have a way of, and we've been taught to put our parents on a pedestal.
Yes, absolutely.
And to hero worship and can do no wrong. And we spend our lifetime trying to get their favor, get their attention, get their shabash. And we never really succeed, because that 1 to 7-year-old child did not get that.
Yeah.
So we will not, if he or she did not get that, the adult will not get the way they actually want. आपके parents आपके ऊपर वारी नारी भी हो, नारी जो भी होता है word, वो भी हो जाए,
Yeah.
फिर भी आपको वो नहीं होएगा, क्योंकि आपका बच्चा जो है आपके अंदर, जो आप हो, वो अभी भी does not feel safe. So I've set him free to not be repeating the same cycle, the karmic cycle, and to make different choices. And that is what taking full responsibility for your actions.
Absolutely.
And do it in a way where it doesn't hurt you anymore, and you're not ashamed of it. And the reason why I'm being able to talk about it today, as opposed to even 2 months ago, is because there's so much shame and guilt in transferring or in acknowledging the fact that you abandoned your child.
Yes.
Especially as a mother, you were created, you have a womb. You were created to give life and bring life and nurture life. And I am a nurturer. But to abandon my own offspring because of whatever pain and wounds. So the self has, my bigger self, my original self, has been able to speak to my hurting self, the hurting mother, with compassion, with kindness. You did not know better. You did the best you could.
Yes.
And it's the same compassion that I can now extend to my parents.
Absolutely.
I have nothing to say to them. And I have so much love for them. I have so much love, and it's now not about getting anything back. I just have so much love. And the more we take responsibility, the less conflict there is.
Yes. Agreed.
In our relationships, in our household also. So then tell me, why is it that so many men, and I know women might, I'll forget about the different perspective, but why do so many men choose to live in a place of misery? And I mean in the relationships where you know they're dysfunctional relationships, you know that their children being harmed. Why, like, is it a man thing? What stops us from stepping out? And I'm saying that because I chose to stay in a dysfunctional, abusive, emotionally abusive marriage for 10 years. And both my kids suffered. And it took me 10 years to be able to walk out of it. And for what I thought was, it was because of the constructs of a woman who's gotten married a second time. Now she can't get divorced a second time. And what's going to happen to my entire friend circle? Will I be able to fit in at all? Where will I belong? That was the conversation that I used to have as a woman. So what is the conversation a man has when he chooses to stay in a dysfunctional relationship for a long time? And knowing the effect that it's having on the children, like, what is the conversation that goes on?
I think that for a man who's in that type of relationship, the main conversation that he has is about survival. It's to survive. It's to look, majority of men that are in dysfunctional relationships, majority of them, they choose to leave them because it's too hard, it's too difficult. There is a minority who choose to live in those dysfunctional relationships because they feel that there's a certain amount of either power or weakness that they feel of being in that relationship where they are going to if they think that they're going to come out of it, they're going to say we're survivors and we've gotten through it and we're dealing with it. And I think that for them, that's more of an achievement as opposed to a person being in a man being in a dysfunctional relationship and trying his best to fix, or not fix, but trying to live through it, trying to raise children through it, trying to make children understand why it's dysfunctional. But I just think men are just not in tune with themselves to sort of understand when to think about themselves.
And how did it happen for you? Like, how did it come about for you? What was I love going back to, I was, none of these things are coincidences anyway. Like, out of all the days in the whole entire world, just yesterday a post came up on my feed about the hero's journey. And I remembered reading about it when I was a literature student, which is the entire idea of first we're living in, being asleep in everyday world, and then we're faced with a tower moment, a conflict. We deny it, we turn our face away, but then we know that something else other than our perception exists. So now we're intrigued. Then we meet a mentor who then you see living exactly the same thing that you have a suspicion exists, but you're not really sure. But you meet that mentor, doesn't have to be physical, and you believe that this is so that really inspires you. And you say, okay, let's try it this way. So when you go say, okay, let's try it this way, you set out on a journey. You set out on a journey, and then you meet the big arch enemy, whatever it is. Then you end up defeating it. There's a sense of, are you going to survive? Are you going to make it? You make it. There's a rebirth. After the rebirth, you come back home and you with the Holy Grail, right? And then that's the hero's journey. And I feel like that very well summarizes the process of awakening for people who choose to awaken. So you're given many moments in your life. When are you going to wake up? When are you going to wake up? When you awaken? And we respond to one moment, and that is the spark, the trigger for your journey. So what was that wake up call that you had that finally invited you to see the bigger part of yourself that you had not seen before, but you suspected existed?
I think the wake up call for me was, I can probably give many examples of extraneous events that happened that were wake up calls. But for me, the biggest wake up call was, one day I woke up and I got out of bed and I looked at me in the mirror, and it was actually an out of body experience. I looked at me in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't see the same face reflecting back. It was a face that looked at me and it was just looking at me, not with any sort of, discontent or looking at me with some anger. It was looking at me. It was like this. It was like a glowing me. And the glowing me, it just looked at me, and it sort of just it shook his head. That it may sound very strange, but that's how it was. That for me was the moment that I knew that this journey, which I was on, is done. It's done, and now there's a new journey that's coming up, and that's where I realized that if I don't protect myself and understand that what happens moving forward is going to be radically different than what has happened in the past, then I will never be able to get on to this journey. For me, that was the defining moment. Like I said, extraneous circumstances तो बहुत थी, but for myself personally, it was this one moment, and I'll always remember it because it was literally like an out of body experience for me. I've never experienced something like that. I think it was just a lot of things happening at one time, and there was just that one day I was just feeling just totally exhausted. I just got up and I just saw this person.
For me, thank you for sharing that. And for me, I think I'm a different learner, different kind of a learner. Because and this is what I realize right now, like right now in this moment. The two moments which have acted as my wake up call have been moments that I've actually lived over and over again, physically lived, over a course of 5 months, 6 months. And those moments, and I've said no, 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 no. But those moments in their stubbornness keep reappearing in exactly the same way. And the 7th or the 10th time, I've said yes. Okay, I'll do it now. But it's almost as if I've had to prepare myself to answer that call. But the moments have come even before I was prepared to prepare me. So whatever you're referring to as external events, I believe have come as, because we have different forms of preparation. They've come as a form of preparation for you. And it's not about, we weren't meant to answer the call in that moment anyway. They were just preparing, and one day you say yes. And exactly the same for me, preparing, and one day I said yes. And when in that moment, I want to talk about this, in that moment when you do finally say yes, Usman, in that moment, there's not a single other person's opinion that matters. There's no sense of judgment you're fearing. There's no fear of the unknown. There is no future blame, nothing. In that moment, there is just a very pure knowing, knowing that it is now.
Yes.
And I must act now.
Absolutely.
But to reach that moment, it is the process.
Yes.
And only in hindsight, I feel that we can see that process, because I literally just saw that process. Because मैं वही कहती थी कि ये तो नहीं हो सकता एकदम से सुबह उठा आपका moment, नहीं होते होता prepare and then Monday, I love that. I know that you wrote something about the self. Would you like to first of all speak of this, like the background, if you want to?
Well, I think I've covered the background. I mean, I've told you about conversations with myself.
Yeah.
And conversations with myself have been very, very new, very scary, but liberating. And in fact, my children have caught me a couple of times talking to myself, and they're wondering what's going on. But they've actually seen me do it, and
that's incredible.
I'd like to think that maybe that it inspires them to understand that there's nothing wrong with loving yourself. There's nothing wrong with looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, you're beautiful. I love you, and you're gonna be fine. And just focus on the new you, because the new you the journey is gonna be awesome.
It is. It is already awesome.
So I'd like to read it, because
yes,
I also shared it with my children, and they thought it was pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that's what obviously it's a subjective opinion. So this is from me to me. Who is in that mirror looking back, right at me, like he's pointing at me blinklessly? It's been a while since somebody saw me as a whole. It's somebody, just not the old me. I swam against the current, let the wind take us where we should not have been, rendering my patented inner strength, my superpower, limp. Yet here I am, older, a tad wiser, hearing a new voice and looking right dead in the eye at the anti-me. This is me, on a brand new journey. What happened? How? Why? This isn't us, he asks me. I howl. There was joy, pain, sacrifice, hurt, guilt, and anger. I can let it all out now. I tried to take care of me throughout this now unrecognizable Bohemian Rhapsody. But it was all a bit too much for that me. He never gave a chance to himself to choose to be happy. Learn, unlearn, learn, unlearn. Cleanse, rinse, dump, declutter, redo. There's no end in sight of what has to be done. The me in the mirror tells me that panic and chaos will get me nowhere. I'll do better, and I have to do better. We need to look after ourselves. It's okay to be, it's okay not to be okay. That's life.
Yeah.
Just breathe, just smile, just let it out, just live. We made it, you and me together. The old you didn't love you enough. He's gone. Your rebirth is a journey. Embrace it, love it, own it, just do it. We've got this. Just learn to love you more. This time it shall set you free. I didn't know that the new me had it in him, but all it took was a look in the mirror. I'm not alone anymore.
No, you're not. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And here's to falling more in love with ourselves.